US President Joe Biden is hosting world leaders for a virtual discussion on climate change. He wants them to do more to slash emissions ahead of a critical UN summit in November. For more, Nick Harper joins us from Washington, D.C. Nick, the Biden administration concerned that not enough is being done ahead of the COP26 summit.
Well, Steve, yeah, it certainly seems so. Organising this extra summit, very similar to the one that the White House organised back in April, and something of a warm-up act, I guess, before the main event, the COP26, that UN-led summit that's taking place in Glasgow, Scotland, at the beginning of November. It seems that the US really wants to push countries to make better pledges ahead of that November conference. But at the same time, they're being a little bit cagey about what we can expect. They're downplaying those expectations, saying that there's unlikely to be any major announcements coming out of this Friday summit. We do know that behind the scenes, they are targeting methane. We've had CO2 emission targets set by all of the countries, but the Biden administration wants countries to put in place similar targets for methane emissions. They want to create a global pledge, for example, reducing methane emissions by at least 30% by 2030. Another hot topic of discussion is likely to be climate finance, so how richer nations help poorer nations with their plans to cut emissions. The EU has already pledged $25 billion annually. We don't have a similar pledge from the US, so some countries will be pushing the US to do more on climate finance. There's some suggestion that they want at least $12 billion being pledged by the US to be able to help out those poorer developing nations.
And Nick, it's still unclear if China will be taking part. How much can be done without Beijing being at the table?
Well, that's right. Unlike the April conference here in the US that Joe Biden led virtually, that one was live streamed. This one will not be. It's being held behind closed doors. The White House says that allows leaders to have more candid conversations, but it also means that we don't know who will be attending. There are 17 nations who've been invited, like they were back in April. We don't know if China has RSVP'd, and the big problem is China needs to be at the table to discuss this. They're the biggest emitter in the world of CO2 emissions, and the US wants them to make stronger pledges ahead of COP26 in November. India and China, neither of them have upped their pledges, their commitments to cut emissions since they made them some months back. And the US says they need to do more ahead of November. So yes, the hope is that China will be taking part in this summit, but it's unclear whether or not they will be.
All right, many thanks for that. Nick Harper speaking to us from the US Capitol.